You probably would have been led to believe that Star Wars Outlaws was the biggest disaster of the year for Ubisoft, and, well, you'd be wrong. And so was I when I first discovered that apparently they spent an awful lot of money on a Quad A game that nobody really cares about and nobody's actually playing. You know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about Skull and Bones and about $750 to $850 million wasted. We're going to talk about it on That Game Place. Hi, friends. It's me, CC, here, back once again with the Pro Crew, talking a little bit about some crazy Ubisoft stuff. I've got with me the amazing Nolan Thunder. How are you, Nolan?
I'm doing good, and you're amazing.
Nah, thank you very much. And, of course, I've got the man from deep in space, Space Dave 2000. How you doing, Space?
I'm doing great. I was just upgraded to a quadruple A credit rating, so I'm very happy, sir.
Oh, fantastic. I want to get some of that action. But speaking of quadruple A gaming, never heard of this. It's brand new. It was invented, an idea that came out of the minds of a Guillemot brother who has been running their gaming enterprise into the ground because Ubisoft allegedly spent between 650 and 850 million on its Quad A title, Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones. Have you guys heard of this game?
For about 30 seconds.
Yeah,
every
this
time
is
I
like.
see it, every time I see it, I keep thinking it's that old Rareware game where, like the pirate game, they did a few years ago. Like,
Oh, yeah.
There's been a lot of pirate stuff, and this hasn't done a lot to really stand out.
Yeah, no, it really hasn't. And as a matter of fact, this particular game really reminded me more of like a redo on the Black Flag game, which is an old Assassin's Creed, which is kind of like makes sense. They just took a page out of that game and tried to move it over to something new. Well, a rumor claims that Ubisoft spent that kind of money, and this is coming to our friend, or from our friend Endymion over on YouTube, of course. And his sources within Ubisoft have been telling him that. The project basically ruined Ubisoft. It wasn't Star Wars Outlaws soft sales in the second quarter. It's Skull and Bones, and that amount of money is probably why. And here's the video if you want to go check it out with the thumbnail that says bankrupt on it, which well, he's pretty much right. Endymion shared that I was told the project that ruined Ubisoft was actually Outlaws. It was not actually Outlaws or Shadows. It's Skull and Bones. My sources told me that they have seen multiple different versions of the game that were each completely different over the years. They said that they were told that the budget that was spent on Skull and Bones it ranged somewhere between 650 million to 850 million over a decade. 10 years. And that Skull and Bones failed so badly for Ubisoft, it was the actual reason why they're dying the way that they are. It's not actually Outlaws and Shadows, if you can believe it. So they sunk a legendary amount of resources into that game, and it clearly did not work out for them at all. Gentlemen, I asked you if you'd heard of this game. Now, I'm going to ask you, can you believe they spent that kind of money on it?
Believe, yes. I think from what I've seen in the other industries, this used to be like flabbergasting, but I'm not surprised anymore. Like hearing GTA 6 is like $1 billion game. I'm not surprised that they spent this much money on this. This is $85 million per year culture. Think about how many games back in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s could have been made for just that budget alone, 85 million. And you're talking 850 million. My real question here, and you and I are both kind of in the, thinking financially, right, culture. Yeah. How do you not get to year about 3 or 4 and realize this is just a money pit and that you should probably shut it down? I don't get this.
Well, look, I mean, you'd think in 5 years you'd have somebody going, why are we still trying to make this game? I don't know. But Nolan, what do you think? Do you think that this is a reasonable amount of money to spend on a video game?
No, not even close. What boggles my mind more is because the amount of time it took to make this. Like, that's routinely. No one noticed that all this money routinely year after year was going into it. When this thing started development, I'm pretty sure Family Video still existed as a corporation when this thing started. It's been like after a while of throwing money in the trash can, you're like, hey, don't you want to see something, eventually grow from the seed we've been creating? You plant in the dirt and, we're going to get all these sales when the game finally comes out. And honestly, where we been seeing the headline here earlier where this could be what's gonna doom Ubisoft in the long run. I believe it, because aren't the greatest deaths said to be with a whimper as opposed to a scream? If you keep dumping astronomically amounts of money into something, it could sell like a billion copies and could still not be a huge or sorry, not a billion copies, but make $1 billion and still not be a huge success compared to a smaller budget game. How could this go unchecked for so long?
Well, and that's a good question. And one of the other problems that Ubisoft has, kind of leaned into is elevating the prices of their games and turning them all into live service cash cows where they can just continue to monetize people and try to pursue the whales. In fact, one of the investors in one of the calls asked a question about this game specifically. In fact, here's the question. Could you maybe unpack for us the decision to price it at $70? You've certainly emphasized that it's designed for a lot of live services. What drove the decision to make the game pay to play when you could presumably limit the size of the player base and thereby PRI in the game? Guimont responded to that in the financial call with, "You will see that Skull and Bones is a fully fledged game. You can see it on the market today. It's a very big game, and we feel that people will really see how vast and complete the game is. It's really full, AAA, quadruple A, that will deliver in the long run. In the long run." Right now, I believe when I checked the player DB on this, it had about 626 players for Steam. If you check those numbers, you'll find that less than 2,600 players were playing simultaneously during its all-time peak. I'm going to say this game is not popular. And following the game's release, Tom Henderson over at Insider Gaming reported that the game currently has around 850,000 players total at time of writing, which includes those who have opted to play the game with the 8-hour free trial provided by Ubisoft. That's telling. You also have the people, obviously, with Ubisoft Plus, which is their, Game Pass version. And in the same report, Henderson detailed that Ubisoft spent around $200 million on the game, and it doesn't expect to make it back. Well, it spent $850 million on the game, and they don't expect to make it back. I don't know. Space Dave, if you made a game and you don't expect to make the money back, do you think those people should still be around at the company? Do you think that aspect of the studio should still exist? Do you think anybody was making good business decisions here?
Well, in this day and age, I think we've talked on other shows that you fail upwards in this current economy, but that's not how it used to be. If you did things like this, you'd instantly be fired and you'd get no severance. And I think, again, we said, how does it go this long with nobody catching this? I would suspect, and I think somebody said that they had some obligations to the government that kind of helped, I think through tax write-offs in Singapore. Now, they were probably locked into something legally. Regardless, they should have probably cut their losses far earlier and just dusted this title. Again, I would suspect, if I were an honest person in this company, that there was some money laundering going on through all of this, because that's just, again, total speculation. I have no sources to that, but that's a lot of money to disappear down a hole and expect returns. You would need, let's see, if you say at 850,000 concurrent players, you'd need $1,000 out of each of them, if they were all whales, to make back just your money that you spent on this game, not advertising, nothing else, just the money you spent to create this game. So in what world does that exist? None that I'm aware of. So there's a lot of holes in all of this story that make me a little curious.
Yeah, more than a little. And again, if you kind of think about it, between the game production itself and the marketing and everything else, I mean, this game kind of, and I'm going to say it the harsh way, kind of passed like a fart in the wind. But Nolan, when you look at it in these numbers, from when the game was released on Steam, which was August 22nd, it only hit 2,615 players max. Do you believe they have 850,000 players?
The numbers at the end of the day don't lie. And this is just a walking, like, all the writings on the wall that this is going to be possibly one of the biggest flops of the past 5 years. If any of you guys can remember, like, probably about around a decade ago, probably around the time this game actually started development. I remember THQ used to be a respected video game
Yeah.
company. They banked all their money into bringing the UDraw tablet peripheral to like other systems outside of the Wii, and it
Right.
completely flopped. And one big
Yep.
failure completely destroyed the company.
Yeah, it
This
wrecked
could
them.
be the one to do it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think this is probably the one that really will bring them to their knees, and the ancillary effects of Outlaws and of course of Assassin's Creed Shadows next year are going to kind of finish them off. That'll be like the coup de grace because they're going to be in rough shape, bankrupt probably, and looking for some protection and restructuring, and probably go private. I think we've had a wonderful conversation on that particular subject on our live stream right up there if you want to check that out right now. But moving on, I just want to say this. If you've gone from 2,600 players at peak to 412 at the time that this was measured here on SteamDB, of 412, it's an 85% decline, and I just marked it as far lower than that in its most recent 24-hour peak. So it's very, very bad. But it's estimated the game has sold between 23,600 and 34,100 copies. That's the total number of game sales.
Ooh,
That is an absolute disaster. And for comparison, and this is another failure we've been talking about a lot recently, is Concord from Firewalk Studios. It had an estimated Steam sales between 20,800 and 25,700. That's also not a very good number.
and that game got yanked after like what, 6 days, 2 weeks?
Well, yeah, it was gone in 2 weeks. I think it was touted to be leaving inside of 10 days. So they have some real problems in the gaming industry right now, and it's with all of this agenda, I would say. But if you look at the sales, that's terrible. So I guess we get to the end of it and we say that, Ubisoft has a string of bad decisions, including X Defiant, which the game player base is disappearing, much like Concord's did, only slower, but still disappearing. And you have them allegedly spending between $650 and $850 million on a game. You know what? Here's a very simple question for both of you, and then we're going to wrap this up and ask our audience the same question. Gentlemen, starting with you, Space Dave. Is Ubisoft going to exist in its current form 1 year from now?
Definitely not in its current form. If anyone is smart out there, and I think I've said this on other shows before, if you were smart, you will take this company over and take the assets that are still worth something in the minds of people. That's just my advice. I'm not saying giving financial advice to any individuals, but if somebody, this is the golden opportunity while they're still publicly listed to go in and just take it over and strip it bare, because that's all that's going to happen. Either that'll happen or they'll go private and kind of reconsolidate everything and probably fire a lot of people, I would imagine, and take their losses for what they are. Or they're just going to be delisted off probably the French stock market sooner or later as they, dip further and further below that. I think they're at $12 euros roughly now.
Yeah, they were somewhere between 10 and 12 euro the last time I checked on them. But
yeah,
they've been a constant descent into Hades for the better part of 5 years.
Their debt's going to catch up to them sooner or later, like very quickly this year.
And quarterly they're still borrowing. Nolan, do you think this company's going to exist in its same form or fashion next year?
No. I'm more curious to know what's going to happen after the big whatever event that's going to be. And this one's probably the thing that's going to set it off. I could see some of their IP going out. Like I could see Assassin's Creed maybe going to like Xbox, Rayman maybe to Nintendo. Just Dance will be an interesting one because that's still one of their headline franchises. And it was interesting to see like what I feel like that could still remain with Ubisoft, but I could see Ubisoft going the way of kind of like Atari, to where it's still technically around, but it's definitely not the same image it used to be, nor the same creators have really anything to do with it anymore. And it's kind of tragic because they were one of the big juggernauts. I remember when E3 would come around every year, you're wondering like, what's Nintendo showing? What's EA? What's Microsoft, Sony? And Ubisoft was always one of the premier ones there. And I can't say I've always been a major Ubisoft kind of guy, but even as someone who's more of an observer on the matter, it's disastrous to see all these decision makings that are going to eventually doom this company. It's sad.
Yeah. And I guess that leaves us with a question for our audience participation time. Do you think Ubisoft will be the same company it is now a year from now? Do you think it'll have changed? Do you think they will have been forced to sell off IPs, or do you believe they will have gone private? Is there some form of restructuring in their future, or will something come along and actually save the day? And finally, do you think that when we get to February that they will have a successful release of Assassin's Creed, and or will that be the, let's say, the striking blow that takes down the entire company? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments section below. And while you're down there, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It's free. You'd be doing us a favor. We're climbing our way to 5K, trying to get to 10K before the end of the year. And we can only do that with your help. And as we always say, get your game on.